a dark kid. In my family, we had a rule. You don't hit girls. My family had many rules, and rarely did any of them keep me safe. My mother's anger was something to behold. She had her reasons to be. She was angry because she had been bullied in high school, and her friends had taken advantage of her in college. Angry because she had been expelled in her senior year for some bullshit plagiarism charges. But ultimately, it was her grief from my sister's death that fueled her explosive rages. My father's anger was quiet, and he rarely exploded the way that my mother did. But that doesn't mean he didn't explode. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see his young, unbearded face contorted in rage, mad at some insignificant thing, a chore that wasn't done, a toy that hadn't been put away. Luckily, he worked most of the time, and at night he took classes to get better at his job, so he was largely absent from my early childhood. My mother, not so much. And it was rare that my other siblings would be subjected to their physicality, their lack of respect for bodily autonomy, their punishments that bordered on sadism and spite, because I was male-bodied and the second oldest of 6, flanked on both sides by sisters. And in my family, we didn't hit girls. There's a special irony in that now on the other side of my transition. My mother's favorite weapon was her hands, slapping in an unrelenting flurry of blows. Sometimes she would use her wooden spoon. I remember laughing once when it broke because of her heavy-handedness. Perhaps it was a weak spoon. Perhaps my body had grown tough enough to withstand such simple armament. The next time, the spoon was metal. My father favored the belt. I don't remember it as often because he mellowed as he got older, and he hid his shame behind a beard and a quiet, thoughtful presence. But the belt stung, and when it was threatened, it was not taken idly. They both yelled at each other when the cracks in their marriage became apparent, at us, their children, when we deviated from their standards of perfection, and at me every time I was some new sort of failure. I remember wielding my mother's anger once like a well-crafted bow aimed at a boy who was both bully and role model, and perhaps even childhood crush, Kenny. We had gotten into a pen war on the bus ride home, and not only did his marks cover my arms, but a few had strayed onto my nice polo in pointed lines that I knew I would be blamed for. And what had started out as fun turned to tears as I walked home from the bus stop. When my mom saw me and asked what had happened, I told her some boy down the street had drawn on me, and she turned into a mother bear in search of this transgressor. Her fierce screams scared Kenny so bad he ran out the back of his house, chased by her echoes down the train track behind our neighborhood. When his parents would later come over to settle the matter, I lied about the pen fight, not wanting to take my stake in causing a scene that had scared Kenny so bad that he hid in the woods until his parents came home, because I had no woods to hide in at home. I would hide in the closet, or I would lock my door and hide in my bedroom until we came up with another rule. We have no locked doors in this house. Eventually, the three of us would go to family psychiatry, because at the age of 12, I tried to commit suicide for reasons which at this point should be obvious. My dad thought it was a cry for attention and was upset that he wasn't included in the suicide note, in which I had left all of my earthly possessions to my siblings. My mother grew more protective of me and turned her anger on anyone who would upset me in the slightest, and part of me felt a little smug that I was no longer the target of her anger, but the subject. Eventually, the psychiatrist would suggest that perhaps my parents were part of the problem that had pushed this quiet and eloquent kid into drastic suicidality. And a year into our therapy, my parents agreed to a resolution that they would no longer hit their kids. And I say no longer hit their kids, but it was rare that my brothers would be treated in this way. James and Joe were 7 and 5, respectively, though that did not stop my parents when I was their age. So really, they had agreed not to hit me. However, there was one time while we were driving to Michigan to visit my mom's family when her and Sophia got into a verbal argument. And my mom didn't make idle threats. So when she stopped the van and got out to slap Sophia with a frenzy of open palms, I shielded my sister with my body and reminded my mother of the promise she had agreed to. It had fallen to me at 13 to hold my parents accountable to this tenuous agreement. You don't even know what your brother just saved you from. It was probably one of my bravest moments. And still I think about how my siblings have no idea the slings and arrows that I suffered to prevent them from having to have the same traumas. And at 13, I was quite large. I had gained 30 pounds every year since I was in 5th grade, 180, 210, 240, 270. And I had always been a bit cheeky. And at this point, I didn't really have much respect for my mom, so my dad electrocuted himself while fixing some wiring in the basement and exclaimed, "Son of a bitch!" I prompted my mother into attack mode by answering, "Present." And in a triumph, my first against my assailant, I caught both of her hands as she tried to slap me. And she tackled us both to the ground as I laughed in her face and in the success and knowledge that she could no longer hurt me. I wish I could say that my own anger was mild, and it is now. But it came through a journey of all those moments and that therapy and new understandings of bodily autonomy. I used to break objects instead of breaking people, but that doesn't mean I couldn't explode if someone tried me the wrong way. You can still see it below the surface. People make way when I get that strange look in my eye or things turn physical. Nah, man, we don't have to fight. You look like you have training. No training, just survival. I did survive, and in the end, that's the most important part of the story. Because in my family, we had a rule. You don't hit girls. I wish the rule had been, you don't hit children.